All right, cool. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting of the Watershed Erosion Task Force for Thursday, October 12th, 2023. Do we want to do our roll call before I do a little housekeeping stuff? Does that work? All right, let's do our attendance.
Member Bartlesmeyer.
Here.
Member Delonte. Member Sturman.
Here.
Member Berger, excuse me. Member Patton.
Here.
Mr. Patton's on Zoom. Member Donaldson. Co-chair Holthouse. Councilmember Edens.
Here.
And Ms. Edens on Zoom as well. And co-chair Farmer.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. So just a few things here before we get started. Just a reminder to everybody in the room, since we are recording, if you have a question or something to say, just turn your microphone on and then turn it off when you're done. And then everyone on camera can hear us. And I did want to start this evening with a little announcement. Mr. Vunich and I have spoken with her a few times during the week, but my co-chair and our friend Carol Holthouse has let us know that she would be resigning from our task force. She's got some medical issues going on in her family that she needs to spend some time on. So we're going to pass on all of our well wishes and good thoughts to her and hope things are figured out there quickly. I can say that, you know, in my time here on our task force, we've done a tremendous amount of work. And I think a very good part of that is due to Carol's hard work and really dialing in on these issues. So she's been an important part of our task force and a great help to the city. And I really appreciate her as a co-chair and a member. And we hope that we can see her again soon. So she won't be joining us moving forward, but thank you so much, Carol, for all that you've done over the last few years. It's been greatly, greatly appreciated. And with that, I think that we will, I guess we will approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was in July. Does anybody want to approve those or have any questions on them? Anything like that?
So move.
All right.
I'll second.
Perfect. We've got a first and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Miss Edens abstains. All right. With that, we will move on to public comment. I don't think that we definitely don't have anybody in the room. I don't think we have anybody online. So no public comment for us this evening, which is great. So now we can move into our busy schedule today. Mr. Vunich, tell us all about our RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the purposes of introduction, again, Dan Ron is our Assistant City Engineer. I requested he sit at the dais tonight because he was integral in the development of the draft of the proposed RFQ. And so from that perspective, I wanted to make sure anyone on Zoom could hear him, Mr. Patton, Ms. Edens, as well as you on the dais as well. As you know, over the course of time, Mr. Sturman and others have spent a great deal of their energy and resources trying to find funding. And as we've worked through those funding mazes to get to a point where we realize there's not much out there for what we're doing, and for the most part, what is out there is difficult to obtain, we also realized that some of the grant programs always talked about a master plan for stormwater management as a key component or element of the grant application process. And with that, it became something that was added to our agendas, stayed on our agendas for a number of meetings, probably the better part of a year, if not longer, and ultimately has now kind of worked its way up into the ready for action versus not ready for action. And tonight we are the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning presenting to the Commission a draft of that RFQ that we would like to use for advertisement purposes to the consulting community to obtain basically their qualifications. And once the qualifications are provided, narrow that list of submittals to those we think are best suited for the task force members, as well as the city of Wildwood, and then do interviews with the task force and Department of Planning, Department of Public Works, and then City Administration. So why the EPA? It appears, as in most instances, whether it's roads or bridges or other major infrastructure issues, the federal government is, for the most part, the major funder of those. And as a major funder of all of those things, including stormwater management, the EPA has produced a document that, for the most part, sets out the requirements for a good watershed management master plan. And so tonight, with the assistance of Mr. Ron, we have kind of created what we think is a RFQ in draft form that would deliver to us firms that are qualified to develop a plan under those EPA guidelines or specifications. And ultimately, if then completed and adopted by City Council after recommendation from the task force, would be that key element to help us with funding, because we would know that we've met the EPA requirements in this regard. I think for the most part, the request for qualifications is somewhat self-explanatory, but I had asked Dan to maybe go through what I think are those basic areas of the study. And that's where the consultants will distinguish themselves in terms of how they respond to questions relative to those 13 or so items. The other item I thought that was very important was just the point system for the selection process. Once we do get some submittals to the request for qualifications, and how the task force and team members here at City Hall will kind of work through them. So with the permission of the chair, I'd like to kind of maybe turn it over to Dan to kind of go through at least those two areas. And then once he's completed, then take questions from all of you about the document itself. So thank you.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, Director Vunich, appreciate it. Yeah, just wanted to, if you look on the page 2, there's a list of about 13 items there. I'm not going to go through them individually, but those are kind of the major scope outlines. You'll notice one of those is the making the master plan in accordance with the EPA's 9 points. One thing I wanted to say about this scope is that because we're doing an RFQ, it's a qualifications based selection, and so how that works is that it's not something that we evaluate on price, and so we get engineering firms to give us qualifications on projects that they've worked on, and we evaluate it that way. So one of the things that comes out of those negotiations for these types of projects is potentially other scope items that the engineering firm might say, hey, we should probably look at adding this too. So anyway, I just wanted to caution you there that this is not necessarily the only thing that would happen, but this is just kind of the things we've identified that are important that we want to make sure that they hit on with their presentation to us. So as far as that goes, I think a public engagement piece, I know this committee's done a really great job with public engagement and reaching out. I thought that was an important part of this in terms of getting a firm that has good experience, taking a lot of, public engagement data and incorporating it, and also just being good at public engagement. So anyway, that was one of the things that we discussed. And then, so I guess in regards to the scope, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. But the big items are integrating the work that we've done with USGS, and integrating their modeling as they get that finished, and making this in accordance with that EPA watershed plan, which, like Director Vunich said, allows us a foot in the door for funding potentially. That's one of the first hurdles to get funding, is having a plan. So anyway, and then as far as just to kind of reiterate what Director Vunich said about the selection process, we kind of came up with this, the list here, and this is also something that's up for negotiation. If you all want to add something, or obviously this is kind of the task force RFQ. So just as far as that goes, I think it's important to have I think it's good for firms to know what they're being scored on, because then they know what to present to us. And I also just, it's a nice way for what I envision is we get statements, qualifications delivered to us. Some group, whether the entire group or some subcommittee of the group, whatever that may be, takes these scoring sheets and scores all of them. It's a tedious process, but it's worth it. And then from there, taking one or two or three firms and interviewing them in front of the whole task force. And then that gives everyone a chance to kind of get to know, the potential people they'll be working with and ask questions and things like that. So anyway, I think that's kind of the approach here. I think that also, because this task force, I mean, we could take this and do it at our desks and bring you guys a firm, and we could certainly do that if you want. But I thought, I was just thinking, I think we were thinking that because this firm or this task force has been so engaged that, give you all an opportunity to stay engaged. So that's really all I have. Two things there with the score sheet and then the scope of work.
Mr. Chair, I know Ms. Edens has her hand raised, but if I could just dovetail on a couple of items, then
Sure.
I'll be quiet as well, and then we'll let you all talk and ask your questions or make comments. Mr. Ron did an excellent job of identifying the United States Geological Survey, USGS's participation in that 2+ year study, and making sure that's an integral part of any response we receive from the consulting community. I also wanted to make sure, as part of this RFQ in draft form, that Dr. Hammer's work was not forgotten. As you know, many of you have been on the task force now for the 3+ years. Dr. Hammer was kind of our go-to scientist in the early part, and for the most part identified the issues that ultimately we've refined down over the course of time as our priority projects. So there's a lot of information that Dr. Hammer's developed. I think it's imperative that they review the minutes from our task force meetings, where you all as the members have provided great insights, whether it be from the standpoint of firsthand experience, unfortunately, or background in architecture, engineering, and then certainly the funding component, which we've spent a great deal of time on initially. Also, this was something Mr. Ron added, and I think it's a great addition to that task list, and that's the integration of the green infrastructure into the project components. And that's something I think is worthwhile. And I think also if we find it to be suitable as part of this watershed management master plan, I think there's a cost savings associated with it versus hard fixes typically. So that's a couple of things I just wanted to add. And I'll reiterate something Mr. Ron said, and I think it's very important. You all have been very hands-on through this entire 3+ year process, from going out in the creeks and getting training to walking the creeks and identifying problem areas. And so from my perspective, you need to be as comfortable with the consultant that's selected to do this plan, because I see you as being part of that team that responds to their questions, reviews their product, and ultimately gives them input. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Edens.
I just had a brief question. Sometimes when we do RFQs or RFPs from the council side, we'll have a completely open bidding process. And sometimes we have particular suppliers in mind where we'll go ahead and email the suppliers and ask them to respond. I was just wondering if maybe through recommendations of other communities in the state or in the area, if you had any businesses that we were going to be reaching out to and contacting directly, or if this is just kind of, we hope that they find it online. And there's no right or wrong answer. I was just curious.
The chair, and again, Ron, this is a joint question, I think. What I would like to do is that there are local firms that have good experience in stormwater management and the development of stormwater management plans. I forgot Mr. Brown's on as well via Zoom, so another great resource. I think it's an excellent suggestion in that we maybe look beyond just the normal component. And those communities that do have stormwater management master plans, and we can find those certainly, we should contact them and just say, the company you used, were you satisfied or not? If they give a thumbs up, and we put it on a list and mail them the RFQ so that they're not missed, so to speak, in our process.
Yeah, and I wouldn't add a lot to that, but I would say that there are, we will advertise this on our website for sure. And we'll advertise it in the newspaper, like we normally do, but we will, we have a list of firms that we know that are local, local to the St. Louis area that we can send it to as well.
Perfect. Well, if it's okay with the chair, while I have the floor, I'd like to go ahead and put a motion to approve this as presented. I know you'd need a motion before it would be amended if somebody else disagrees and wants to add something to the RFQ. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve as prepared. And I'd like to thank both departments for helping. Really appreciate the work. It's so nice to finally see this. We've talked about this for a long time and we've had so many irons in the fire and we just finally got to it and it's great. Thanks.
Would anybody care to second the motion or amend it if they have any other thoughts or concerns?
I will second it, but I have some questions.
All right, seconded by Mr. Sturman, and please ask your question.
Mine is about scope in this RFQ. And some of this may be obvious, but I'm thinking that they were using the data that's already been developed by the folks we've had out there. They're going to, am I right? They are going to examine, of course, all of the creeks. All of the situations throughout the creeks, what the behavior has been, and then I guess reestablish. Will they then reestablish the priorities that they feel, and then, last but not least, will they include any budget type estimating? I'm just trying to get my head around what their scope. In their RFQ, what their scope is to be included by them.
Do you mind if I take that?
Not at all.
Thanks, Mr. Sherman. I think well, we certainly are going to incorporate. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. So yes, part of the 9 watershed, the 9 elements of the EPA watershed is certainly identifying costs based on projects. I think this is something we can work with a firm on with a scope negotiation. I don't think we should probably spend a ton of money on reprioritizing stuff we've already prioritized. I think we'll probably be able to work with a firm that and say, here's all the work we've done here, take a look at it, see if you see anything weird, but we'll probably be able to run with a lot of that in terms of project priorities and things. But I also think from a bigger level, one of the things that we want to have them look at too is like our stormwater code and our buffers that we have, some of those things that get into how we manage stormwater in the future or keep prevent future erosion. So I think the overall scope is to kind of tie together everything we've done and create some specific water. We have 9 sub watersheds, and just to create some specific plans for each one of those to say this is what can work best here, this is what can work best here, and also identify the projects inside of that.
When you say what will work best, are you talking about the type of system for treating the bank?
Yeah, just in terms of an engineering solution, like what's the best engineering solution for a particular, project that or place that we've identified issues.
Don't get me wrong, first, but have not we already been afforded quite a bit of that type of thing? What type of system to use already? The firm that, yeah.
I think we probably have with, especially the projects that and I think we're going to go into that a little bit, but with the projects that we have already identified and we're moving forward with, I also think we'll figure out a way to integrate that because we've got some momentum on some of that stuff too. So if we're not going to cut anybody out of the loop. So if we've got some projects that are already kind of ahead of what I would say the master plan a little bit, not in a bad way at all, but just already moving forward. So I think we can certainly integrate that.
So then
fact,
what
it
you're
can-
kind of saying, if I understand you correctly, it's kind of a reaffirmation of a lot of the information we've already brought in.
Some, but I do think we're going to get a much more, I think like a structured plan for each of the watersheds. So I think, yes, a little bit that they're certainly going to be reviewing a lot of information that we've already done. But I also think that those are costs that we won't incur, with a lot of that data collection. So I think we've certainly helped ourselves with some skin in the game with that.
A lot of the agencies that I talked to in my going around asking for funds, that's one thing they wanted was a plan. So that'll be good to have.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sturman, you said about the potential firms or the firm that's ultimately selected. If they don't say in the interviews we hold with them that they intend to walk all 9 watersheds, at least the mainline creeks, I think that's a key indicator. We probably don't want them. Some way, somehow, they've got to acquaint themselves with the 9 watersheds. Secondly, I think we were all a bit naive 3 years ago when we figured, oh, we've got 9 watersheds. We'll do investigations of all 9, find the problem areas and be done. When we got into Cox Creek, which was the first one, I think Dr. Hammer came back the first time and said, we've got 25 critical areas and there's a lot more because I didn't get all of the creek done. And then we started looking at just the few that were problematic and threatening. And we ended up not really going beyond that Cox Creek watershed for the most part. So I think the key element of this plan is we'll look at the other 8 watersheds and give them the consideration we probably should have, but couldn't because of just the magnitude of the issues in Cox Creek. And I think 2 things are out there that will benefit whatever consultant we identify. Cox Creek is the most volatile of the 9 watersheds. Part of the USGS study is to look at potential solutions to those problems. And so if we have a consultant that ignores 2.5 years of study by the federal agency, it's probably one of the best experts in it. And obviously we've fallen short, and that's just another thing we need to talk to them about. And if they don't use your budget information, at least in terms of the scope of all the different agencies, entities, organizations, not for profits, whatever the course may be, I think they'd be amiss too. So we've got a great deal of good information, I think, we can use. Thank you.
All right. Anybody have any other thoughts? Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I do have a question. I was not here at the beginning 3 years ago, and I heard you mention in your introduction that there was a reference to a master plan at that time and that it kind of sat dormant. Am I not correct about that? So
Yes.
my question is kind of a big picture guy, and I have to fit this in because when I started reading the stuff today, I saw all the stuff that said, geez, U.S. Geological, Hammer, Wagner, and I'm starting to think I'm having trouble putting this all under one umbrella. So my question to you is that 3 years ago when you started and there was a mention of a master plan, it seems now that it has resurrected itself. And my question is the plan put together now because we have had some trouble finding funding? Or was the plan, the master plan really in the works all the time for a purpose other than funding? And I look at that like Mr. Sturman, the business about if they come in, some consulting firm, are they going to rehash everything that's already been done. And I understand that I see in number 8 and whatever, all of those things are mentioned. But help me understand the master plan and why now is it that important? Is it because it was there all along, or is it because we have run out of funding options?
Well, with the permission of the chair, I think it has always been kind of that document that's underpinned everything that we've done. We knew that we lacked a stormwater master plan, and for the most part, it wasn't because we didn't think we needed one. We just thought that between our master plan, our natural resource protection standards, our tree preservation and restoration code, our grading code, the reduction in densities across the board in all areas of the city, that maybe we were doing exactly what a master plan would require, but not with the benefit of a master plan. But we always knew there was a need. So the reason I think it kind of scooted down the agenda to not ready for action is when we kind of just started scratching the surface, we saw the problems that we had thought were addressed by those things had not really been addressed. And so we had to scramble to look at problems where there's erosion threatening private property and buildings and structures, public infrastructure, bridges and roads, the loss of parkland, the loss of private property. So I think we got surprised, and that surprise caused us to start looking more of a practical matter of how do we address these immediate needs and then come back to the long-term component. But as Mr. Sturman said, I think he mentioned it every time we talked about another funding discussion and a strikeout, is that they all talk about, do you have a master plan? We'd like to see it. And we need that now.
So my question then, so funding now becomes a little more not probable, but likely, in this sense, if the master plan is there, no matter how we got there, but the fact that whether it's EPA or what other organization, the likelihood of us pursuing a different kind of funding goes up with this master plan.
I think under the worst case scenario, and Dan, correct me and add, I think we're neutral. It does us no harm. And on the positive side, I think it can only help.
And if I could add to that, only because there just isn't a steady stream of stormwater money yet. I think that it's a topic that is continuing to grow and grow nationally, but there's just not a lot of steady funding streams. So we've had a few big grants kind of come and go, but anyway, so it will help for sure.
Exactly. Well said.
Yeah, and I think I will add to that. I mean, I'm obviously a fan if we can get money from the federal government or Bill Gates or whoever wants to give us money, we're happy to take it. But it does seem to me that more than likely at the end of the day, the fix to the problems that we know that we currently have and the problems that we also know we have, we just don't know where they are yet, is going to more than likely fall on the shoulders of the citizens in some fashion in the city here. And so one thing that we talk about on the city council a lot these days is, new developments that are coming to the city, housing projects, whatever that may be. And we've learned our lesson, I think, over all these years that we really do need to have a more robust idea that isn't just a one-stop shop. If you're building something in Wildwood, it's not just a singular set of requirements that are maybe necessary depending on where you're building those things. And so if we have to go to our voters with some type of stormwater tax or whatever that may be down the road, being able to say to them, we've learned these lessons on our own, we've gone out and sought good, real help on this and developed a robust plan, is just, I think, hopefully going to assuage some of those concerns people might have that this is just some random pipe dream where we just want to have an extra penny because it makes us feel really good. That's right. So I think it's a really, really good thing. Anybody have any other questions or thoughts? Okay, well, we've got a motion and a second. Everybody remember what we're voting on here, or anybody needs some clarification? Think we're good? Okay. All those in favor of Miss Eden's motion to move forward with the RFQ as presented, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, gentlemen, let's keep this ball moving forward. I like
Thank you very much.
Detention basins. Let's hear all about it.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the task force, as you know, this group made a recommendation a while back, or so in the middle of the beginning, our first quarter of 2023, to proceed forward with what we like to consider an immediate project, one that maybe was more attainable in the short term because there's improvements already in place, existing detention and retention basins, and based upon the work of our two engineering consultants, Joe Wilson and Todd Wager, had a lesser price tag than anything we've looked at to date. So to update you on what's been proceeding forward, Todd Wagner, who is the principal in terms of consulting services for this retrofit of detention and retention basins that exist today, has been working on constructing the models necessary to do the determinations whether these basins can actually be retrofitted, and if so, what types of storm events they can accommodate, and probably more importantly, can these retrofits be done without causing any damage to the basin property or surrounding homes? As you know, a lot of these have homes that back to them, and so we've got to be cautious if we increase the volume they hold, not to flood anyone or cause downstream damage. The modeling is getting very close to being completed. I talked with Mr. Wagner yesterday. He also identified that the final component of the modeling is the survey work that the task force recommended and city council approved. I do want to tell you that that approval process is a little slow, and that's why we're here in October and we're finally looking at the survey work being approved by city council. As a task force, you all recommended the survey work proceed in July. In August, that recommendation was at work session of city council. In September, the bill was introduced to authorize the contract with the survey firm. And then just this week, the bill was approved and the authorization of the expenditures was to proceed. So it took from your July action a few months to get where we are, but it followed process. City council endorsed it. It was all unanimous in their actions. So from that perspective, we're good to go. I suspect the survey work will be done in the next 3 to 4 weeks because there's just 7 basins. It's not like we're asking them to do a large area. And then that information will be provided to you, so you have it as reference to Mr. Wagner. And then we'll see if we get the models. I'm thinking sometime right after the first of the year, we'll start getting answers on those 7 basins. So a little bit of a slow process, but it's still moving and has been moving ever since your action in July.
Excellent. Anybody have any thoughts or concerns on the basins?
Yes. I'm maybe because I'm ignorant about it. The survey that you referred, have we seen that?
You saw the proposal from Doring Engineering, which was for approximately $49,000 to do the 7 basins. So about $7,000 per basin.
But I mean, and when you say survey, does that mean talking to the people next to the retention?
Oh, I apologize. No, actually, it's a land surveyor will go out with a crew.
Oh, okay.
And they'll basically do elevations,
Okay,
locations. things like that.
I thought you were doing a people survey. Sorry.
My apologies.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Let's hear some updates on our projects.
So first, Mr. Chair, thank you again. Mr. Chair and members of the task force, we have some recent updates to provide you on the existing projects that are underway. So as you'll remember, a while back, Paul Delante with the United States Geological Survey, a professional peer of Mr. Ron, had a proposal to us about the USGS doing an intensive study of the Cox Creek watershed, particularly its middle and upper reaches. Ultimately, the task force recommended and city council endorsed that study, and we've been involved in that now for almost 2 years. And as you can see from Dr. Leroy's update that was provided via email, the study is in the final stages. A lot of things have been completed, and a lot of the modeling is done, and a lot of the conclusions and research and writing is going to peer review here in the next couple of months. So again, much like the retrofits of the basins, I suspect that in January, or at least in February, we'll start seeing a stream of information from our study team led by Dr. Leroy for us to consider and discuss. So a lot going on. And as you can see, they've done a lot of different things, a lot of technical work, and also, as you'll recall, a lot of field work in the creek itself. I'll go through all three, and then if there's questions or comments. Evergreen Forest Court and the Highlands at Wild Horse. The department took the recommendation of those two projects to City Council, and with the endorsement and being the maker of the motion, Mr. Farmer, our co-chair, got that all approved. And with that approval, now what we are doing is moving forward with the engagement of the engineering firms to assist us in the design, engineering, and bid specifications for the two projects. We suspect that the cost of those two projects will be in the 6 figures based upon just the soft costs associated with such. And so for this year, we're putting aside $250,000 in the budget, which is yet to be approved for 2024, for that design, engineering, and the development of the bid specification. We hope to hit the ground running here in the next month or so with the preliminary discussion with potential engineering firms, and we'll bring those firms that we've narrowed it down to you at our hopefully next meeting. The preparation of the engineering plans and bid specifications, given how busy all the firms are these days, may take months, and then the process to select the desired firm or firms, having it through the task force, through council committee, and then the city council, may mean that we'll be back in shorts and t-shirts before we have a recommendation before you, but we are making progress there as well. And I think it's key just to note, Evergreen Forest Court and the Highlands at Wild Horse are two primary projects of significant importance now to City Council and are being funded. And then finally, we have our permit program under the Clean Water Act, Section 404. As you know, anytime that a community, such as Wildwood, a private citizen, regardless of lot size or anywhere in between, goes into a blue line creek, there is a necessity to have the Army Corps of Engineers involved. A while back, we had a discussion in advance of the ARPA funds being available, is that we would get certain projects, two of which are the ones that are now funded, Evergreen Forest Court and the Highlands at Wild Horse, shovel ready, so to speak. And so part of being shovel ready was to get the Corps on board and get them the permit application so that we could get pre-permitting for those, so that if and when funding came through ARPA or the state of Missouri, we would not have that delay in proceeding forward. In talking with Todd Wagner and Joe Wilson, the other consultant, engineering consultant on the team, the applications were submitted as noted in late June of this year. The applications are out of the Corps' hands, so to speak, and they've been sent to other federal agencies for comments. For example, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, things along those lines. So those other agencies are asked to comment on the proposals, permit applications, and ultimately those comments are then consolidated by the Corps of Engineers and returned to the applicant, in this case, the city of Wildwood, and our two engineering consultants, Joe Wilson and Todd Wagner. So progress is being made there as well. I emphasize, as with anything, progress is slow these days just because of staffing and funding and just a lot of other things going on. Mr. Bartelsmeyer, who works for a local home builder, can attest to this. Everybody's busy, the local engineers, the surveyors, et cetera, et cetera. But progress is being made. Thank you.
Anybody have anything they want to add? Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Mr. Vinich, if I recall correctly, we did have some funding yet this year that we had intended to spend on projects. Are we able to accrue that for next year, or how does that work?
Yes, as you know, we started 2023 with about $750,000. The thought being that if we got all 5 of the ARPA grants that Rick Brown and Dan Ron worked upon, the matching amount for the city would be that total. When we discovered that we were not going to be funded through the ARPA programs, we then shifted gears and we spent that money to begin our basin retrofits and to look at projects, the 2 that have been identified and endorsed now for that spending. So the intent is to earmark that amount of funding as we move out of 2023 into 2024. And hopefully then, if things just go perfect and we can start construction, the idea would be to start construction as soon as possible.
Does that need city council approval to move that over?
Yes, that'll be part of the fiscal year budget
Okay.
for 2024 that city council is working through now with Public Works Administration, and then it's coming Tuesday, Planning and Parks.
Mr. Sturman.
So you still have to go out for, it's not still in, not out, totally out of the design phase. Then we have to go out for bidding for these then. And so Mr. Berger's neighborhood, plus beyond that in Evergreen, that going to, yeah. And then Highlands of Wild Hearts. Yeah. I'm unfamiliar with that, but I guess they're quite extensive there too. The bank work.
Yes, what we're seeing there is the stretch of creek between a new bridge installed by the city of Wildwood at Strecker Road and Shepherd Road. Then a new bridge more further north on Strecker. There's a section of the creek there that is meandering, full of rock, much like all the rest of Cox Creek. But we're seeing threats to erosion to a common ground area where there are structures and the downstream bridge, and was a key component in the determination for that fix. And then obviously Evergreen Forest Court, where we've seen just the threat to the private property there is so great that it needed immediate attention, or immediate attention is months and months.
Immediate attention, hopefully by next summer, we think. It's coming.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's just, it's a process.
Yeah.
And not much we can do with it, but work within it as best we can.
Anybody have anything else on those? All right. Our program matrix.
Program maintenance, I actually have a few things I want to identify. And then obviously if Mr. Ron, Mr. Brown, or Mr. Newberry would like to add anything. First and foremost, under the public outreach efforts, I just wanted to note that through the efforts of Mr. Farmer at Celebrate Wildwood, we had a tent there for the stormwater erosion control, the stormwater erosion task force. And with his assistance and his background, we had a video that ran all day, kind of describing what we do and why we do it and the problem it creates. So thank you to Mr. Farmer. And if you had any comments yourself, I'd be glad to hear them. I hope you were happy with it.
Yeah, I think that the more information, I'm always pleased when we put information out and then the conversation that it starts, and also the conversation when I happen to be over by the booth, that people would come up and look at the map and look at what we were doing, and they were honestly pretty informed already of what was happening, which is a good thing. I mean, I think, over the last several years with this task force, we've gone from, I think, the idea that most people in the city certainly knew we had watersheds. I don't know that they knew what they did or that they were in any kind of trouble. And a lot of people are talking about this stuff now, which is important. We'll need a lot more to talk about it, but every, one foot in front of the other, little steps will add up eventually. And then in a few months, we'll start fixing some projects.
We'll
So it's
do
all
it
good.
Immediately.
Right.
In a few months.
Exactly.
Well, thanks again to Mr. Farmer and others who provided support to that effort for our Celebrate Wildwood event. Maybe another shout out to Councilmember Edens. She arranged to have our state representative, Justin Sparks, meet with certain Department of Planning and Department of Public Works individuals. And we actually walked the two areas of the several areas of Cox Creek. And Representative Sparks was integral in getting the $500,000 in the state budget that was ultimately vetoed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Edens if she'd like to add. But I want you to note that that's the first time I think we've had a state official in the creek actually walking it with us.
I really appreciate staff taking the time to go out. I sent sort of a Hail Mary email out of frustration and said, I'd like to show you some areas in my ward, specifically the Anniversary Park area that isn't in my ward as well, in the Highlands, and just hoped he was available, thinking that if I started the process early, that there'd probably be cancellations, and then weather in Missouri happens as well. And I just got very lucky that we had a good weather day and a schedule day. What I did express to him was that I would like him to come back out again and look at how the area has changed after weather events. And he's more than willing to do so. And so I just really tapped the toes in the water in Ward 2, but with the thought that this is an ongoing relationship where he comes out, sees other areas of concerns, maybe has the opportunity to meet with you guys and other council members as well. So I just thought, what the heck, and it worked. I was really pleased with his willingness to take the time, and I will say he was very interested. And he did truly feel like seeing it in person gave him a different perspective, and that the pictures, being in the creek and seeing the scale of the way that the banks have sheared off is different than looking at it in a picture, right? So seeing a 30-foot drop off in person is so much more dramatic. And I felt that he was really impacted by that. And I think he now has the vocabulary to express that when he meets with not only our lobbyists, but other representatives as well. He can now say, hey, I saw this in person and it's bad. And that's a tool that we want to continue to give any locally elected officials in the area, because our watersheds affect, Bonholm Creek also runs into City of Chesterfield too, right? So we're all kind of connected, and the more we can do to kind of reach out to area representatives and senators, I think that the better our effect will be.
Good. Thank you for doing that, Lauren. It's an important thing to get the people and seeing it in person. It really does change what you're looking at for sure.
Yeah, and it was the last minute scheduling. So next time we'll get something on the books and make it an even wider effort, I think.
And Mr. Chair, the last item maybe isn't just another shout out to our city administrator, Tom Lee. He has been huddling with our legislative consultant in advance of the Missouri legislative session that will start in January of 2024, and been going over all of the things that hopefully we can do to ensure that if money is set aside, it stays in the budget. It is not vetoed. So think of it as this perspective. This started probably back in August, a full 5 months before the legislative session starts. And our legislative consultant, Mr. Silverman, knows the importance now based upon just the input he's been receiving from Mr. Lee, as well as I believe what he'll hear from Mr. Sparks, our representative. when they get together in January in Jefferson City. So a lot of little steps, but as Mr. Farmer so eloquently stated, they all add up to maybe a longer walk and success. And that is all I have from the matrix, but if there are any questions, again, Mr. Brown, Mr. Round, Mr. Newberry and I are available. So thank you.
I do have one question. So what could we expect next meeting?
It's a very good question. And so from the department's perspective, I hope to have several tangible items for you to look at. I'd like to think that we'll have some information from USGS in terms of the peer review. I'm thinking the next meeting may be just between the holidays, but a short meeting to kind of give you the information so you can review it before we get back together in January. So something from USGS. I'd like to think we'll have the comments back from the Corps of Engineers to show you what they're thinking in terms of the 3 projects, 2 that I've mentioned, and then the third being the triple meander. So USGS. And then I think I'm counting on having something from Todd Wagner in terms of the base and retrofit. So those would be 3 items. And then as you saw on the draft RFQ, we're anticipating sending that out sometime in the beginning of November, receiving it back just before the holiday, in the end of the year, the holiday season, and then kind of tackling that at the next meeting, which I would probably think will be either late January or early February.
Anybody else? I will just add, we had a conversation on Monday at the council meeting about the city's received about $1 million that was somewhat unexpected from a settlement with Spectrum. And we are talking about what to do with that money, but also about what to do with the reserves that the city has and what's an appropriate amount of money to have for that, and taking care of a lot of the things, including Watershed was a big component of that need to be fixed in our city that have maybe been deferred or however we want to describe that, not taken care of perhaps as often as they should have been. So as we go through this process that Lauren and I are dealing with and our city staff in terms of our budget for next year, it's something to think about for those of you members that are on our task force, anybody that's watching. These kinds of conversations are the things where we're starting to understand what we need and how that works. And I think Joe sent me over a note where we were right a little bit north of $5 million to get the remainder of our most critical projects fixed. And so when you're talking to people out in the city, or you're having an opportunity to talk to your specific elected officials within the city or in the state, having that knowledge and knowing that, $5 million is not an insignificant amount of money. But as a city, we have quite a lot more than that sitting in reserve. So the question that a lot of people have to ask is, do we have a reserve if we have $5 million worth of repairs or whatever it is out there? As an elected official, my opinion is not really, but different people have different opinions. So now is the time to use your voice when we're having these budget conversations to make sure that we have the right amount of money that we need to get these projects done when they're ready. We, I think, as a task force, have done the best thing that we can do in terms of being shovel ready so that we have, the ability to go when we do it. But I think any of these projects that we're talking to, any of these funding entities that we're looking at, the more we can bring as a city to show that we're legitimate, not just with a project on paper, but with a project and some money in the bank, I think that will go a very long way. And hopefully having Mr. Sparks and maybe some of our other state, even national officials looking at these things will help us get what we need to have done. Because those of us that have been here for a while know that we've got tens of millions of dollars of fixes, and we don't have probably even a tenth of the knowledge of what is actually going on in there. So it's a big problem. It reaches beyond our borders. and it's something we have to address. The good news is, as a city council, it is our second, officially our second priority, but I would say it's kind of a 1A at the moment. Our first being our internet situation, which hopefully we're getting fixed here shortly. So then we'll be at the top of the list, and then all the attention in theory will be even more on us than it already is. So I appreciate all of you being here and helping us with that. It's gonna, I think, pay off in the long run for the city. And again, I just wanted to thank our now, I guess, former co-chair and member Carol, and wish her the very best. And we hope to see her soon. If nobody has anything else, I guess I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Perfect.
Martin, second.
Excellent. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Anybody abstain? All right, we will see you probably sometime in December, I would imagine. Have a safe and happy Halloween, and